my name is Christina Ringel. I am giving this presentation with the title Informed Consent for Archiving from my home country, Germany. Before telling you about the data from my PhD project, I would like to acknowledge all traditional custodians in Australia and the world, past, present, and emerging. In this presentation, I want to share with you how I went about the question, how can I get informed consent for archiving? I'm referring here to my PhD project, which I recently concluded. Many of you will have their individual answers to the question of why it is important to archive research data. For me and my project, there are two main points. Archiving audio and video data resulting from a research project does not only serve to safeguard it, but can also provide access to interested parties. In particular, archives can provide the community, whose members contributed to the data, access in a suitable form. I have handed over all the linguistic and cultural data that I gathered during a project on the Murung language to the Muruma Dawang Wulapgaring Language and Culture Center in the form of a hard drive for their local server. But I also would like to provide at least a selection of particularly relevant recording sessions in a form that they can easily find and view, that is, Murung individuals. To begin with, I will go into some detail about my project. The goal was to describe the linguistic expression of possession in the Australian Aboriginal language Mirrawong. Mirrawong is an endangered non-Pama-Nyungan language of the Darugin family. As you can see here on the map of Australia, traditional Mirrawong country lies in the Kimberley. The red arrow indicates where Mirrawong is traditionally spoken. I employed a variety of methods for data gathering, including an analysis of the corpus of Mirrawong texts collected by Francis Coford and Dr. Knut Olafsky, discussions of topics from a typological questionnaire, acceptability judgments for issues not found in the corpus, and, in particular, language games and tasks. The aforementioned language games and language tasks constituted the main method for my PhD research. Language games are suitable for the endangered language situation since they allow the inclusion of elders as well as younger speakers who are second language learners. I knew from my internship at the Language Center that language games have been a common way of learning aspects of Mirrawong grammar and lexicon for the employees of Muruma Dawang Wulapgaring. Knowing that language workers are familiar with language games and enjoy this activity, I asked whether they would be interested in being part of the design of the games on the one hand and the implementation on the other hand. By implementation, I mean that they help to explain the procedure to the elders. The elders, in turn, taught the necessary sentence structures to the language workers. The possessive constructions produced by the elders were collected in a database for analysis. The input by the language workers ensured that the stimuli were culturally relevant. Thus, the language games that were produced are a fitting supplement for the variety of revitalization measures the community is undertaking. The data collection with the language games and task method resulted in 4.5 hours of recordings. 173 possessive sentences were collected with picture pairing games. For example, the first picture pair shown here was designed to trigger the Mirrawong counterpart of the English sentence, "The red bag belongs to the girl." 19 possessive sentences were collected with a story task. For example, the 3 stimulus cards shown here triggered short stories along the lines of, "This white person came. He bought lollies for his children. Then the child hid those lollies. He hid it here in his house." In order to be allowed to collect this kind of linguistic and cultural data, data sharing agreement forms were signed by the Miruma Council Aboriginal Corporation, all project participants, and me. The forms comply with ethical guidelines such as those published by IATSIS. Note that the guidelines for ethical research in Australian Indigenous Studies, referred to here, are now superseded by the Code of Ethics for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Research, which was published in October 2020. Ownership of the video and audio recordings and linguistic and sociolinguistic data created within the project lies with the community. I was given the right to use the data in my dissertation, but I am obliged to consult with the community and obtain their permission if I give a talk at a conference or publish a paper or poster. The agreement guarantees the language community full access to the results no later than at the end of the dissertation project. The agreement forms openly state who outside the community is involved and how the project is funded. It is emphasized that participation in the project is voluntary and can be discontinued at any stage without stating reasons. The agreement includes a provision for the treatment of a language consultant's language data in the event that someone withdraws his or her participation. Moreover, it describes a process for resolving conflict. The agreement forms state that great care will be taken throughout the project to comply with community traditions and regulations, such as restrictions on who can work together with whom, and which information can only be shared between certain people. For example, some pieces of information are women's business or men's business. To ensure that all participants can give free, prior, and informed consent, the goals, benefits, and consequences of the project are explained. Both the potential benefits and the social and cultural impact of the research project are stressed. Likewise, technical terms surrounding a doctorate and the consequences of writing a dissertation are explained. In the agreement forms, the language consultants are asked whether the language data can be used in the dissertation, and whether extracts from transcripts of video and/or audio recordings can be published. Provided the data can be published, it is inquired whether this should be done in connection with the name of the language consultant or whether they prefer to use a pseudonym. If the data is not to be published, the document offers to specify for whom and for how long the restrictions should be upheld. As shown on the title page and this slide, provisions for data archiving are also included in the agreement form. Consultants are asked first whether they agree that their audio and video recordings are put in an archive. The consultants can tick yes or no. Then they can tick yes or no for the following statement. I give permission that traditional owners of the Murung country and language have access to this data. After that, the consultants consent or deny that they give permission that other linguists may apply for access to the data. Finally, the consultants are informed and asked to confirm that when they die, their family can tell me that for a certain time, nobody is allowed to see and listen to their recordings or pictures. Consultants are advised that their families can specify and later extend the time period. In the following, I will go into some detail about how informed consent was collected with these agreement forms. Participants were given the document to read, fill in according to their preferences, and sign. Alternatively, oral consent was asked for and recorded, in particular with the older speakers. During the project phase, co-authorship for papers and talks was offered to language consultants with whom I had worked closely and who had indicated on the form that they would be interested in this kind of acknowledgement. As you can see here, A paper at the Societas Linguistica Europea was co-authored by Agnes Armstrong, and an article in the 13th issue of the Koalas series was co-authored by David Newry, who taught me some of the intricate aspects of land ownership. With regard to the initial question, namely, how can I get informed consent for archiving? I would like to summarize that one can ask consultants to sign or orally consent to an agreement that complies with ethical guidelines, for example, with respect to the ownership of data, that clarifies information about the goals and benefits of the project, about funding and the terms of participation, and that assesses participants' preferences concerning the publication of the data, the use of names or pseudonyms, and archiving and access restrictions. Here is my bibliography and my acknowledgements. I would like to thank all those who participated in or funded my research. And thank you for watching.